The drama surrounding Caitlin Clark on the night of May 22 was not manufactured for television. It was not a storyline built in an editing room or a narrative pushed by a broadcast team looking to fill airtime. It was 40 minutes of deliberate, calculated physical targeting executed by a Golden State Valkyries team that had studied the film, identified the pressure points, and arrived at Gainbridge Fieldhouse with a specific plan. Not a basketball plan, a disruption plan. And for an entire half, it worked almost exactly the way they drew it up. What they did not plan for was what happened when Caitlin Clark decided she was done absorbing it. To understand the full weight of that night, you have to understand the strategy that Golden State brought into the building. This was not conventional defense. Clean defense does not work against Caitlin Clark. Defense gives her comfortable catches and clean footwork and the half-second of separation she needs to make any shot in her entire arsenal look completely routine. The Valkyries had studied enough film to know that, so they sent Tiffany Hayes onto the floor with a completely different assignment. From the very first possession, Hayes had both hands involved in ways that had nothing to do with the basketball. Wrists grabbed at every catch, jersey tugged at the hip through every screen, a forearm in the back on every drive into traffic. Clark would spin free from one grip, and Hayes would find a new one before she could even plant her feet. Pick-and-roll possessions became hand-fighting contests. Off-ball cuts became wrestling matches. Every single action Clark ran through Indiana's offense came with a physical tax that Hayes was determined to collect on every single trip down the floor. The genius of that kind of strategy, if genius is even the right word for it, is that it does not destroy a player with one moment. It destroys her with accumulation. No single grab is the thing that wears you down. It is the relentless addition of every grab, every bump, every uncalled forearm across 40 minutes of professional basketball. Eventually, if the blueprint holds, that accumulation starts showing up in a player's decisions. Fewer drives, safer catches, a player managing their body instead of attacking the game. The referees made it considerably easier for Golden State by swallowing their whistles through most of the first half, allowing contact that would have drawn fouls in a different game on a different night. Contact that was visible on broadcast replays and left entirely uncalled, while the Valkyries kept executing their assignment without consequence. By the middle of the second quarter, the evidence of what was happening was written directly on Caitlin Clark's body. Long red scratches running across both forearms, marks on her shooting hand. You did not need to watch the game closely to read the story those marks were telling. Sophie Cunningham was absorbing the same treatment on the perimeter. And after the final buzzer, she went live on social media, pointed the camera directly at her own face, and let the world see every mark she had collected across 40 minutes. She laughed while doing it. The damage was completely real. There is a specific moment in every physical game where the team running the pressure strategy believes it has found its opening, where the body language on the other side tells them the accumulation is beginning to change how their opponent is playing. Golden State thought they had found that opening by halftime. And then, in the closing seconds of the second quarter, in the middle of a scramble for a loose ball, the entire night shifted permanently. Clark drove hard toward the basket. The ball ended up with Valkyries forward Janelle Salone, and Salone, reacting to the contact and to 40 minutes of a game that had been physical from the opening tip, stepped directly into Clark's face. What followed became the defining image of the entire season. Salone stepped forward, and Caitlin Clark did not move backward. She stepped forward too, eyes locked directly on Salone. No flinch, no retreat, no sideways glance at the bench to see what the coaching staff wanted her to do. Just a competitor looking at another competitor and communicating something that required absolutely no words to translate. I am still here. I am not going anywhere. If this escalates, it will not be because I backed down first. The benches started moving. Coaches stepped forward. Assistants reached for shoulders. The arena held its breath for genuine seconds because it genuinely looked like the game was about to become something else entirely. And then, before any Indiana Fever teammate had fully processed what was developing, before the assistant coaches had taken more than a step toward the floor, Misha Hines-Allen was already moving, not walking with concern on her face, not jogging because the situation seemed to warrant it, sprinting, at full speed, directly into the center of that confrontation, arriving before anyone else on the floor had registered what was happening. She planted herself between Clark and Salone and made the message unmistakably clear without a word that would reach the broadcast. You want to get to her, you come through me first. Double technical fouls were issued. Both teams headed to their locker rooms at halftime. The broadcast moved past the moment in less than a minute. The halftime show filled the break, and the confrontation that permanently shifted the identity of this Indiana Fever team received 45 seconds of television airtime. But every single player on that floor felt exactly what had just happened and understood precisely what it meant. Here is what that moment communicated to everyone watching from both benches. The entire Golden State strategy had been constructed on one foundational assumption, that accumulated physical pressure eventually produces retreat. That is the architecture of that kind of defensive approach. Keep the cost high enough for long enough, and eventually the opponent starts making smaller decisions. When Clark stepped forward instead of backward, she did not just respond to Salone. She invalidated the entire strategic premise the Valkyries had carried into the building. The pressure is not working. The accumulation is not changing what I am willing to do. That message, delivered without a single spoken word, changed the psychological foundation of everything that came after. Then the second half began. On Indiana's first major possession, Clark brought the ball up slowly, players clearing space on her side of the floor. Everyone expected the Fever to settle into their half-court offense and begin methodically rebuilding their rhythm. Instead, as Hayes picked her up at half-court, Clark dribbled deliberately toward the center court logo. Not the three-point line. Not a comfortable shooting spot. 33 feet from the basket. And without hesitation, she rose and launched. The arena went silent for a split second. Then the shot went through the net clean. The building exploded. It was not just 3 points. It was a sentence. After an entire half of fighting through physical defense, after absorbing contact on nearly every possession, after receiving a technical foul before halftime, Clark answered in the most devastating way available to her. She made the impossible look like a Tuesday. That shot broke Golden State's defensive strategy completely. When a player is willing to shoot with full confidence from 33 feet, traditional defensive schemes begin to dissolve. Defenders have to extend farther from the basket. Help defenders get pulled out of position. Passing lanes open up. Aaliyah Boston started receiving cleaner touches in the paint. Kelsey Mitchell found space on the perimeter. Indiana's ball movement transformed. Clark was not just scoring anymore. She was controlling the entire game from a distance that most players would not even consider a realistic shooting location. The final score was 92-82 in favor of Indiana. Clark finished with 22 points and 9 assists, a technical foul, a flagrant one foul called on a hard screen and upgraded after review, and by her own post-game estimate, approximately $1,000 in fines across all 3 incidents. She sat in front of the cameras after the game, named the number plainly, expressed no public anger, made no speech about officiating, inconsistency, and moved on. That composure in the postgame session is almost as revealing as the logo 3 in the third quarter. She is not interested in winning the public argument. She is interested in winning the season. But the wider picture matters deeply. Under the league's progressive discipline structure, Clark is now one technical foul away from territory where a single emotional reaction in a physical game carries consequences that extend far beyond the night they occur. A suspension does not just cost Indiana a game. It costs her statistics, momentum, and presence in an MVP race at exactly the moment when voters are forming their most lasting impressions of a season. An official warning was directed at the Indiana Fever after the game, not at Golden State. After 40 minutes of scratched arms, Cunningham's marked face broadcast on social media, and an elbow directed at Clark's head, the warning went to Indiana, and every team remaining on the Fever's schedule now has a documented playbook for how to make Clark's competitive instincts work against her. A specific human being she identified, communicated directly, and the Fever delivered. That is not a passive response to a problem. That is a franchise player who sees the solution and goes and gets it. Hit that like button, subscribe with the bell on, and stay locked in, because the Indiana Fever story is nowhere near finished.